and welcome to Death and Taxes. It's been literally when I started this project, it was one of the first ideas I wrote down.
Yeah,
Was the idea of and taxes was for me to always talk to people in different industries and how it ties into what I do for a living and what
sure.
we all have a material responsibility to do. And death and taxes for me was always something that I really wanted to do. So thank you, Austin, for not only doing this with me, but hosting us here at the DuBois Law Firm.
Absolutely my pleasure.
We are excited to be here, and we're going to face life's two guarantees head on in this series,
That's what we
which
do.
is death and taxes, right? So I'm your host, Joey Rodriguez, and today I'm the guy you call when the IRS sends you a love letter, and today I am here with my good friend Austin. And Austin, take it away. Like, you're an estates and trust attorney, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And why?
That's a great question.
Why?
So yeah, my name's Austin DuBois, here in Newburgh, New York. The reason I do trust in estates, so when I went to college, I majored in philosophy, and it's interesting. Apparently, you can't open a philosophy store.
No, you
Nobody will
can't.
pay for that. But no, I actually did that major with the intention of going to law school. And originally, I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer because I wanted to help people that, had the government coming after them, sometimes for good reason, sometimes for not so good reason. I just
Right.
wanted to be on the side of the people
Right.
to make sure that they essentially, I don't know what kind of language I can use here, but like didn't
You
get
use whatever
screwed.
you
You know what I
want.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I want to be helping the people.
Yeah.
Um, and after law school, I worked for a great guy, a great lawyer. But honestly, I had to sort of choose between eating and paying my student loans.
Right.
So I ended up taking a job doing litigation, arguing in court essentially, for people whose parents had died. So I was representing sort of brother against sister in estates. And at risk of stating the obvious, that's miserable work. That's
Yeah.
just, what a shame when someone dies and there's this huge fight that happens
Right.
afterward. Um, and I realized that, first of all, I just didn't like arguing all day, every day. Like, it's not as fun as it might sound. Like, I'm a passionate guy. I like to get into a debate, but being a hired gun for one side of an estate, matter is just, it's not fun at all. What I did want to do was be the guy on the front end that helps plan things out and put the puzzle together to, like, make sure that doesn't happen, to make sure that the arguments don't happen, to make sure that things go really easily.
Which leads me to my first question about you: is that
Yeah.
what does an estates and trust attorney actually do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a trust and estates lawyer, trust and estates and elder law
Elder law.
are yeah, they're the terms that we use, and there's actually a lot of subspecialties within that. Um, what I do, I kind of say I do three things, and they're all chronological. The first thing I do is that when the waters are calm, as I say, when people typically are about retirement age, sometimes we work with younger people, but we just help them, like I said, put the puzzle together to make sure that whatever they want to happen in the real world has the highest degree of likelihood of actually happening. Nothing's 100%, but we
Correct.
can get you somewhere in the 90s
Right.
if we're being proactive about things enough. And the ultimate goal is not just family harmony, but in my world, it's essentially asset protection. You got your house, you got your savings, maybe you got some investments, maybe you got some other stuff going on. Whatever you have going on from an asset standpoint, we want to make sure that's staying with you and then staying with your family, not going to places like taxes.
Right.
The biggest thing, though, for the middle class these days is long-term care, so we protect against that.
Right.
So there's the second thing I do, which is reactively, if someone needs long-term care, like in their home or in assisted living, or God forbid, but sometimes in a nursing home, we can make sure they're not just like bleeding money out of pocket on that.
Right.
We can set things up so that even if they have a fair bit of money, we have what I call in New York middle class Medicaid. We can get them on Medicaid, keep their money in their family so that their assets are preserved there.
My
And then, of course, after you die, we do that stuff too.
right. My first encounter with trust was actually early on in my career when I was a Medicaid auditor.
Oh, wow.
And the concept of creating a Medicaid trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, early in my career, so I really didn't understand it, but it was my first time encountering it. And
Yeah.
then as I evolved in defining what I wanted to do as a profession, I realized A, people die. B, I always say this all the time, there's a difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here it's like, I learned that I'm like, oh, this is the legal way of moving things out of a
Yeah.
person's name because again, um, you know, I saw it with my grandmother, like it's expensive.
It's
Like
hugely
like like
expensive. Yeah.
like care after a certain age is very expensive
Mm-hmm.
and it could be very taxing to the family.
Right.
So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Um, which I want to clear something up now, early on, as we get started. The misconception of estate planning is only for the wealthy.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. It's probably more important in my mind for what I kind of generally call the middle class, people with, a paid off house, some savings, whatever, because the wealthy can afford to take long-term care on the chin. They probably could afford to pay a bunch of taxes. They could afford to have their family burn a bunch of their money on fighting over it, and their family still ends up with a lot of money because the person was
Right.
wealthy to begin with. Now, I don't want that to happen either. Let me get very clear about that.
Right.
But yeah, the term estate planning, I think I find it less these days, but still people when they hear estate planning, they think like someone's like, 100-acre estate. They think of like
Right.
almost like this generational wealth kind of thing. And that's almost why, when I tell people what I do, I try not to say like trust and estates and elder law. I still do sometimes, but
Right.
I want to be very clear. I essentially help the middle class keep their assets in their family.
Right.
And yeah, the way we do that is wills and trusts and Medicaid and things like
Yeah,
that.
whenever I've taught anything related to estate tax returns, I
Yeah.
always started off with the bum on the street with the shopping cart
Mm-hmm.
and the garbage bag full of toiletries. When that bum on the street passes away, that is part of their estate.
Basically, yeah.
It's
That they're
everything.
possessed of that. Yeah.
It's every possession, every asset, right, that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, when it comes to the Internal Revenue Code, you start looking at estate taxes and all the fun stuff with it. But the misconception is that only the wealthy should hire and or should participate in estate planning
Right.
early on, and that's a gray area. A lot of people don't
Right.
know until it's too late.
But if you own or have sufficient control over something, it's in your estate.
Right.
That's just the term. That's the legal term for it.
You protect your assets, right? We've been saying that earlier. You showed me some of the really cool merch you have and how on the sweatpants on the butt pocket it's protect your asset. I
See
love
what I
it.
did there?
I
Yeah.
loved it. Um, Protecting from who? I feel like
Yeah.
people need to know, who are we protecting our assets from?
Um, Look, the biggest one is definitely long-term care costs.
Okay.
Because a lot of people out there might look and say, oh, well, my family, they all get along. Well, that's great. Not all families all get along, but some do, and some people will say, well, my family gets along, so what do I have to protect against?
It's cheaper to keep her.
Yeah. Well,
There's
that.
other, there's
Yeah.
other, yeah. I mean, when you're talking about assets, you have to
Right.
think about everything, not just death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and the name of the place where the podcast, right? It's and taxes, right? Estate tax specifically in New York, you have to be. I never remember the exact number because it changes every
Inflation.
year, and
Right.
it's like almost $8 million per person at this point.
Right.
So that's just affecting so few people. It's when you've got, like I keep saying, the house and the savings and the whatever. It's the long-term care that if it's 24/7 long-term care, we're talking about like $16,000, $18,000 a month.
Yeah.
Maybe you get lucky and it's $13,000 a month.
Right.
Either way, it's insane money out of your pocket that'll just rip right through your savings and your assets. So the biggest thing I think is long-term care. And the rest of it is sort of like just avoiding probate, the court process, avoiding the sort of messes that can occur without a good plan, generally speaking.
See, right now, I had a client a couple years ago when the New York State threshold for the lifetime was just under the 6 million.
Right.
Because with time, as inflation happens, that threshold increases. So I'm explaining this to a client of mine, and I'm very blunt, and I'm very open book. Like, I don't mind using my own personal life as an example.
Hmm.
So I grabbed a sheet of paper and I told my client, I said, all right, let's go down the list of assets that I own. And let's see
Hmm.
how quickly we get to 6 million. I have an accounting firm with an evaluation of $2 million on it, so I wrote $2 million on the piece of paper. My current home where I live in is valued at 1.2, 1.3. Wrote that down.
Hmm.
Then I said I have a rental income property with my husband, and that's valued at 1.1. I wrote that down.
Yeah, you're
Now
getting
I
close
have
already.
vehicles. I have jewelry.
Hmm.
I have stocks and bonds and portfolios. I have a retirement account. Do you think my estate will get to exceed that 6 million? Back then, this was a couple years ago. That $6 million very quickly
Right.
without even realizing it. Because again, I still consider myself I am a working class uh, person. Because again, at the end of the day, yes, everything sounds nice in numbers, but that only happens if I wake up and go to work.
Look, I
It's
definitely
not like
sit down.
it's
Yeah.
not like I could take a year off and say, oh, it's still all going to be there in a year.
No.
No. So when protecting assets, what is one of the tips that you would give someone like myself, for example? What would be like a tip that you would say this is where I would start if you were new to estate planning or even considering protecting an asset?
Oh boy. I mean, it's such a it's such a rich tapestry, as we say. Um, I think almost what you just said, though, taking the time to actually get a handle on what you do own and what the values are. Um, again, most of my clients are at least around retirement age, and
Mm.
and just in filling out the questionnaire we give them, they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize it went
They're so
to X, Y, and
overwhelmed.
Z."
Yeah.
And I have people that I'll meet with them, and they'll have net worths in the five, six, $7 million range, which honestly is not that's not typical for my practice. My practice tends to be people that are a little more modest than that. But
Right.
again, we're protecting against long-term care. I have plenty of clients that are at that level, but and they'll say five, six, and they'll look at me. They're like, "Yeah, but we don't have much." And I'm like, "I don't know, man. I think 5 million is kind of a lot, and I don't want
And you know what it
it's
is?
worth protecting, isn't
It's
it? I mean,
funny you say that because, whenever I talk to a beneficiary, right?
yeah,
Someone that received a life insurance policy, for example, the first question they ask me is like, Joe, do I got to pay taxes on this money? And I tell them, no, no, it's a life insurance benefit. It's
mm-hmm,
not taxable to you. But when we're at the estate table,
right,
we're counting that life insurance policy as part of the threshold before estate taxes come in.
right,
And
yeah.
yes, federally, we're almost at 50, or I think we
It's
just
at
hit
50. I
15
mean, they make
million
15 flat. Yeah.
thanks to the one big beautiful bill. But and in New York we're closer to the 8 million now. So my thing is that, but people forget about the things that are in the back burner, right? They don't look at the life insurance
Hmm.
because it's not sitting in my checking account.
Right.
They don't look at the 401k or the 403b or the portfolio because it's not sitting in my checking account.
Right.
So my idea walking into your law firm is going to be like, well, I don't have much, Austin.
Right.
I have a house. I'm retired. Eh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where the misconception comes from.
Right.
I don't have a lot. I don't need to protect myself.
And look, I can't. I can only lead the horses to water. You know
Oh
what I
yeah, you
mean?
can't make them
And
drink.
but to me, most reasonable assets are worth protecting. I mean, if you don't want to protect it, you don't have to protect it. But then you just run the risk of that's why I brought the long-term care, because we are all human, right? And it's not definite that you're going to need several hours a day of care or reach 24/7, but like once you start paying thousands of dollars a month for someone to help you in your home or for your family member or whatever it is, then you're going to realize how much you have, and it really won't seem like much at that time
Right.
because of how fast those bills are getting paid.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm a younger guy. I'm 44, but I've got two kids. So is my concern right now long-term care? No, but it is like what happens to me if something. I'm sorry, what happens if something happens to me before my kids are growing up? So life insurance, things like that. The planning during your life, there should always be some sort of plan in place. And maybe it's not a quote unquote estate plan with a trust. Maybe it's more like talking to your financial advisor about life insurance. Maybe there's a bunch of different forms it takes for different purposes.
Right.
Asset protection is something I think we always just take for granted because the potential threats to our assets aren't at something that occurs until later in life, typically.
Correct.
You know, people that do have high net worth, doctors, people that own lots of properties, and they're very liability conscious. They're more on the asset protection kick because they know they've accumulated a fair bit of wealth and they know they could potentially be sued for different things. So there's like fancier versions of asset protection that happen with setting up trusts in other states. Most people have heard about like offshore asset protection because that's the kind of sexy,
Yeah.
crazy sounding
Attractive.
one.
Yeah.
There's versions of that occur. It can occur within
Yeah.
the United States that you still get a lot of protection from.
Yeah.
But that's because they know they've accumulated a significant amount of wealth and they know that they're prone to potentially getting sued. People that have more in that sort of middle class realm of wealth, they're not typically involved in things that are getting them sued, that they're aware of that. And they accumulated that wealth because they've worked their butts off to do it, and they've probably not spent a lot of money. They don't have the mentality of quote unquote having a lot of assets,
Correct.
which is great for accumulating it
Right.
and protecting it in the sense that you're not spending it irresponsibly. But now that you've accumulated it, and once you've gone and sat down and sort of added it all up, and you say, oh, wow, that's kind of a lot of money, you might want to consider doing something to protect it, or at least having the conversation about what your options are.
Understood. 100%. Is part of your practice or your way of doing things is pushing for your clients to, when they come early enough to talk to you, pushing for them to purchase the long-term care insurance?
So we do talk about it for sure.
Okay.
Most of my clients are a little bit too late for that game
Got
because
it.
with long-term, I mean, you probably know, the long-term care insurance, you're just really not going to get it past 50s, maybe 60s, but it might be like pretty expensive at that point.
Right. And the only plus on the tax side of that is that there's a New York State tax credit for the policy. There, it qualifies as an itemized deduction on the federal return if we're itemizers. So, it's definitely something that's always out there. It's just I feel like it's not talked about enough.
I do look, and when I'm dealing with people more my age within their 50s, I often tell them to look into it. There's also, long-term care insurance has gotten a bad rap from policies that were kind of created 20, 30 years ago. And a lot of people ended up having their premiums increase a lot more than they were supposed to.
Right. And it almost gets to a point where it's like, why am I paying for this?
Well, right. And a lot of those policies were what you call like use it or lose it. Like if you didn't need long-term care, then you paid all that money for nothing.
Right.
Now, contrary to that, the newer policies are more like life insurance policies that have long-term care riders. The bottom line is that if you have a financial professional you trust, an insurance professional you trust, it very well could fit into your financial picture. And I think more directly to your point, I have seen long-term care insurance really help people in the long-term care arena. I've had it turn what would have been a reactive plan when we were scrambling to do transfers and it's going to cost them a lot of money.
Right. So
it's turned it into a proactive
I was
plan.
going to ask because again, like I mentioned earlier, the whole thing of forming a Medicaid trust is basically to just remove the assets out of the person's name that's going to be the recipient of the benefit.
Right.
So would this be a good alternative to say, hey, at least if you have this policy in place, you don't have to worry about getting mom's assets all out of her name right away? Or is that still something that you would say it's going to be a case-by-case situation, or it's going to be like, it's a Band-Aid, not a fix?
I think if it really is age dependent in the sense that if you're in your 40s or 50s, or maybe 60s, again, I'm not an insurance professional,
Correct.
There are probably some insurance guys out there being like, no, you can get them in your 60s for cheaper.
Yeah.
So talk to the guy.
Yeah, of course.
That it may make sense, and I have seen it be beneficial. That I know I'm biased, but the Medicaid trust plan. Now it's a plan surrounding the trust. It's not just one document, one thing. But that's like a one-time thing and a one-time cost. And when you're doing it artfully enough, like I submit that we do here at least, it doesn't change your day-to-day life. So you're getting the protection without the ongoing cost. So they're not exactly the same. Long-term care insurance, if you get the right plan, can be a lot more flexible than Medicaid options. But that's why I kind of bring it back to the age thing.
Okay.
Like that's 110% something you should be talking about, considering if you are young enough for it not to be too expensive. But once the horse is out of the barn, once you're more in your late 60s or so, the best option is probably some sort of plan involving a Medicaid trust.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, changing gears a little bit, how does your work overlap with professionals like myself
Hmm.
in the tax industry, or we mentioned insurance industry, right? How does that overlap um, in your day to day? Like, is it something that you're constantly seeing?
Oh yeah.
Are you constantly finding yourself like, all right, well, do you have a CPA? Do you have somebody? Do you have an insurance broker?
Hmm.
And how have you navigated those obstacles
Yeah.
in your desk, in your chair?
So it's 100% part of the my day to day life. And you know what? Like I said, when we start working with somebody, we have a questionnaire they fill out with their family and their general asset picture. And part of what I know is what professionals they already work with, because they kind of say the dream team, right, is a good
Yeah.
estate planning lawyer, a good accountant, and a good like financial advisor.
Right.
And I kind of lump insurance in with the financial advice, but if not, then insurance person
And the
too.
idea is to have them all working well together.
Right.
I always say that. I
Yeah.
say that with my investors. Like
Hmm.
like I whoever your loan officer is or your broker for your mortgage, we should have a communication
Right.
established already.
So I
I
have that
want
as
to
part of my
work with your
process.
lawyer,
Yeah.
with your. I want to make sure whoever your real estate attorney is already
Hmm.
we're already in talks, and it's a generational thing. We're not that far in age. So I've noticed that it's easier to obviously work with professionals around our age group versus professionals that are 20 years older than me, because one of the things they do is
Hmm.
that they're very dismissive.
Yeah. No, I know.
They
Yeah.
they could be very
Now
dismissive
there are plenty of exceptions to that rule.
and there's
There's
and
some guys I work with that
I
are
say it in both
fantastic,
yeah, in both
but more
sides. Yeah.
frequently I get the like,
Exactly.
oh, we don't do it that way. I'm like, well, too bad. This is,
And
I've been
and,
doing this for
and
18 years. I know I'm not that old, but
Yeah,
all day every
but
day for
that's
18
that's
years
the
is,
power
yeah,
of networking, though. And
right.
again, you're very community driven here in the city of Newburgh. You have you can choose to have your practice anywhere you want, and you purposely are a member in the community.
Oh,
Like that's
yeah.
how I met you. So again, it speaks on the way you do business, which is very similar to how I do business, which is like all walks of life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
it's
type of
about the
deal.
people.
Like it's always
Mhm.
about the people and about genuinely wanting to help people.
Right,
And that's what I got into what I got into, because I want to help people.
right.
I didn't want to help people from the inside. I wanted to be an advocate from the outside, which is why like topics like this, especially coming from immigrant parents,
Hmm.
you don't see it. You don't see this is not a kitchen table conversation.
Right,
No one
right.
talks about, hey, did you get
Hmm.
a will done? I
Yeah.
remember being 5 or 6 years old when my mother explained to me what a will was. And again, product of a single mother.
Hmm.
So she's telling me in Spanish that she got a will done in town, and that if something happens to me before you turn 18, you go live with your aunt.
Right,
Your
right.
aunt takes. So I remember vividly that memory, right?
Hmm.
And I'm crying, and she's like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "I don't want you to die."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, and she's like, but again, she had no choice but to say, "Hey, this is in case something happens.
Yeah,
I need you to understand that
yeah.
in the safe, there's a copy of that will.
Hmm.
The attorney has it, and she still has this very good friend who was like a godmother to me, and she goes, and your godmother has a copy of that will,
Right.
just in case."
Yeah.
And again, I'm a young kid, and I'm like trying to comprehend,
Yeah,
well,
that's a lot. Yeah,
what does
yeah.
this paper mean? And then I come in here today, and you showed me your grandfather's safe,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and you mentioned something about wills, right? And
Hmm.
so now I want you to school me. Is that something that estates and will and trust attorneys do? Like they keep the physical document?
Yeah. Hmm.
It's your fiduciary responsibility to have that under lock and key somewhere.
Yeah, basically. Um,
Wow.
if we're keeping the document, it's a fiduciary responsibility. A client can choose to take it with them; it's their document.
Okay.
But it is standard practice
A
for
retention.
the physical will to stay here, because we're going to have a fireproof safe,
Got it.
basically, that thing's 600 pounds. You would need a whole team of people to get it out of here.
And
So
that's
yeah.
and now in your industry, that is that like a due diligence requirement, or is that something that attorneys, some do it, some don't? type of deal?
Most attorneys
Someone
keep the
digital?
original will.
Okay.
Some,
That's interesting to know.
I mean, I don't know, like systematically, some don't. I know some people that have come to me have said that their prior lawyer gave them the original will.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think most
I-
trust and estate
And the
lawyers
only
keep the
reason
will.
why I ask is because, for example, IRS puts so many obligations for us practitioners, right?
Hmm.
We're constantly, we have to retain records for X amount of years,
Yeah.
data
Hmm.
for X amount of years. If I asked a question, did I document it? If
Right.
they mentioned it, did I write it down? If
Hmm.
I saw it, did I scan it? Type of
Hmm.
deal. So I wasn't sure if it was something more of like a due diligence requirement for attorneys overall, or is that something that it's
Oh
just
yeah.
best practice?
No, yeah, it's not a regulatory requirement that we keep the
Oh,
wills, if
okay,
that's
okay.
what you're asking.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Right.
again, I
That's just
saw the
industry
safety
practice, and
stuff.
if we're going to keep them,
Yeah,
obviously we're
yeah.
bound by ethics and regulations and things like
Correct.
that.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift a little bit gears on a little bit more on the tax talk, right?
Sure.
And
I love it. I mean, I don't know if you knew this, but I'll tell you. But I actually have my master's of laws in tax
get out of
as well.
here.
Yeah, I went glutton for punishment. I went to school for another year after I got my law degree,
Did you
so I could
really?
learn specifically tax law
Oh,
because it is relevant in what we do.
so
Yeah.
oh, 100%.
My years of experience, I think, are more relevant, but
Right.
I did get the kind of document, the piece of paper.
There
years
you
ago.
go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Sorry, I
I
went
didn't
through
know
it.
that. I love that. No, I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
thought about it earlier.
So let's talk about the taxes. The ones that show up after you're gone.
Yeah.
Um, who pays the estate taxes?
The estate, so for the estate tax specifically, so there are really two different types of death tax. The one you hear most about is the estate tax, and that is the government taxing the body of value, the property, the money, whatever, that is in someone's what they call taxable estate. Being in your taxable estate basically means you've got either ownership or some version of control over it. For example, certain types of trusts you maintain certain control over. So even though it's in a trust, it might still be in your taxable estate. So the government says, okay, tally up the value of all of it. And in New York State, if it exceeds roughly 8 million, federally, if it exceeds 15 million, then they're taxing a portion of it. And that's a debt payable by the estate itself. The estate becomes its own entity,
Right.
gets its own taxpayer ID number,
Right.
has a fiduciary appointed and an executor.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the reason why I asked this question is because I come across this in well, I come across this as a professional, but also there is the professional obligation of when this crosses my desk,
Mhm.
and then there's the difficulty of detaching emotionally to the situation.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is because, when people say when you say estate to a person, to a working class person,
Mhm.
they're thinking that term only lives in the wealthy realms
Right. Right.
because they're associating estate with trust, essentially.
Yeah.
But thanks to TikTok, everyone now is very well versed in trusts.
Well, they think they're well versed in it.
Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
knows what they want to
Right.
do now.
Right.
They all need trust out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to make sure I point out is that people worry about the beneficiary, right? The
Right.
inheritance, and my question to you is, how do you see that play out when you have a list of beneficiaries, right?
Mhm.
You have an individual that passes away, so now their estate. You're looking at that estate, and you're saying, all right, yeah, they have to work with their accountant, but you're already looking at the value of the estate, and you're saying, oh, this is interesting. How does that divvy up? Like in layman's terms, like, is it saying like,
So
hey,
it's basically
before
a
we
chunk- yeah.
before we start, giving everybody their piece of the pie, do we first get the estate tax calculated and then we give them the piece of the pie? Because if not, then who pays for it?
Right. So you are definitely not giving anybody any money until you are paying the debts of the estate. So, and by you, I mean like the executor, the administrator, whoever's in charge of the estate. Debts get paid first. And then only after debts get paid do beneficiaries get any inheritance.
Right.
So a beneficiary should, in a well-administered or a barely competently administered estate, a beneficiary should never be liable for estate tax.
Right.
In certain states, they have what they call inheritance taxes, which are actually taxes on the money a beneficiary gets. We don't have that in New York. New Jersey does have that. I believe Pennsylvania has that too. I'll do a lot of work in Pennsylvania. But no, all the debts are getting paid first.
Right.
Taxes are a super creditor. Lawyers are a super creditor.
Right. The accountant who prepares
Someone
the
who
estate return, the
professionals
706.
generally are super creditors. And, you know, if someone that covers the funeral costs, like there are various super creditors, and then any other debts.
And then some
credit cards,
executors
whatever.
are not necessarily family members. People
Oh,
sometimes,
yeah, not necessarily.
there's a whole profession out there on having professional executors or,
Yeah, professional fiduciary.
fiduciaries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and
Trustee.
my favorite way of explaining the word fiduciary is if I'm in a vehicle, if I'm driving my own car, right, and I decide to drink while I'm driving and be under the influence of drugs, that's on me.
Assuming you're on a unpopulated road. But,
but I'm
Right,
saying
yeah.
I
I get it. Yeah.
I am the only person inside that vehicle.
Right.
But the minute I say, "Hey, Austin, get in the car with me. We're gonna go, to Albany. I found this really cool brewery. I want you to check it out with me."
Yeah.
I have that fiduciary responsibility because I'm driving the vehicle to
Right.
make sure that I get you to point A to point B in
Right.
in a safe place.
Yeah, 100%.
And the fiduciary responsibility of anybody that's in a trustee role or an executor of an estate is that they have to look out for the best interest of the beneficiary. In
Right.
my industry, we see that gray area a lot, especially with the financial people.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're not conducting fiduciarily the way they're
A
supposed
lot of
to be
financial advisors
because-
aren't bound by fiduciary responsibility, which is wild to me, but it's true.
And I say the financial people because I'm not only putting financial advisors in there.
Right.
Because a lot of the time, it would even be the accountants.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've seen it where the attorney is saying, no, we're going to do everything in-house. So I'll have a client, I'm telling them, all right, who did the estate return? I've done dad's taxes for 20 years. Who's doing the estate return? I know dad's estate. He's came in, he's talked to me. I know everything about this man.
Oh, you mean lawyers that do estate tax
And lawyers will
returns?
right. And I get it. There's a whole not that they do it, but they'll outsource it. I have a lot of clients that's all I know a practitioner that's all she does is that she is a hired gun by lawyers. So she bills him at $150 an hour, and then he turns around and bills the estate at $700-800 an hour. But again, you get what I'm saying, where it's like there's so many things that ethically, when someone passes away, and here's where I go with the moral and the emotional disconnect. For me, it's sometimes difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Because personally, I play therapist, and I know I shouldn't.
Right.
Okay, but you have no choice but to sit there and again, I've seen this person once a year for 20 years, and then out of nowhere they're coming here broken down because someone passed away, and it's like
as a lawyer, I would want you doing these. First of all, I don't do tax returns.
Right. No, I know.
Second of all, I mean, the team approach is always the best approach.
It's always the best.
And when especially when you're dealing a taxable level estate, you don't want to be the only set of eyes in the room dealing with 8, 15, 20 million bucks.
Right.
It's good to have a few different heads in the room to make sure that everything goes as good as it possibly could go.
Right.
And I want to do the law. I want to make sure that everybody's doing what they need to do based on the plan, based on the law, all that.
And
I want to make sure the tax professionals taking care of the tax side of that.
And that's
I don't wanna
nothing
think
else.
about that.
And nothing else.
Like I'm very happy in
And
my
nothing
lane.
else.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I chose this lane.
I am a believer of staying in my lane, 100%. What is the biggest mistake people make when they pass assets to their kids?
Oh, this is easy. Giving it to them outright. Putting assets in their kids' names during life, obviously, but giving their kids control over what are essentially still their assets. I think people do that because they think they're sort of gaming the system, or they think they're not gaming the system, because technically, as a trust and estates and elder law lawyer, it's actually my job to legally game the system. Like, that's my job, to know the laws and know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and set up a plan where it's perfectly within the law and it achieves every goal that the family has. Some people, I know they don't like dealing with lawyers, and I've been dealing with that my entire career. And if it makes them feel any better, they don't have to deal with me that much. I have a very nice team here they can deal with that aren't lawyers. But they think they're, I'm going to stop that sentence and say, no, they're being penny wise and pound foolish.
Okay.
Because it's, you know, we all know what that is. It's they're saying, well, why would I pay a lawyer to do this when I can just like give this to each of my kids? Well, but then your one kid goes and does this, your other kid goes and does that, and then bring up taxes. Then all of a sudden, guess what? Your kids all of a sudden have to pay a bunch of capital gains tax because you didn't keep it within your taxable estate, especially when you're under the estate tax limits. Loss of control, loss of some really beneficial tax laws, and maybe they have to go get it back and they can't get it back. Who knows what's going to happen? So I almost never advise somebody to put assets directly in their children's names.
But as an estate's attorney, wouldn't you think that the client or that your client is saying, well, Austin, I'm moving it out of my estate by putting it in Junior's name?
Yeah, I say, okay, we can do that, but I'm going to keep it in your control.
He thinks he's doing the tax wise thing where it's like I'm keeping the overall number under the 8 million by moving this asset to Junior's name,
right,
and then not understanding what that really means.
Right,
Because then
they're often correctly coming to a narrow conclusion correctly.
Right.
And they're forgetting all the other pieces surrounding it.
Right.
I'll do a personal family story, which is not, growing up and contemplating my mother dying. But
sorry, I'm very morbid.
So it's okay. Hey, look, you're in the right office for it, right? And I am going to put it out there. This is 100% a first world problem, but it was very emotional for me and my family. My grandparents had a second home up in Maine, on the coast of Maine. A beautiful, beautiful second home that my grandfather bought in 1958 for a very low amount of money. My grandparents weren't actually wealthy. Like they apparently did well enough to have a second home, but I don't know. It was very like low level ability to do that. When he died in 1984, I was 3 years old. Some lawyer told, and it was actually my grandmother was relying on a lawyer's advice, so this isn't entirely her fault. Relied on a lawyer saying, well, you should be worried about estate tax. So having this home in your name is a bad idea. You should continually deed it out, partially deed it to your children. She had 4 kids over the course of the next several years, which is what she ended up doing. So she got it out of her taxable estate. Now that was in 1984. My grandmother lived until like 2007. Wow. And in 1984, I'm not going to do the math, but she was probably in her 60s. She had plenty of life left, Right. And lo and behold, estate tax wasn't nearly a concern. She had a condo in Middletown. She would have had that house and like a checking account. Like she didn't have any exciting money beyond that. But of course, within the 30 years before that happened, or 20 something years, 30 years before that, different siblings went different directions, and there was different opinions on what should happen with this house, et cetera, et cetera. And look, while my grandmother was alive, that was no big deal, even though my mother and her 3 siblings owned it together. But upon her death, everybody had different opinions, et cetera, et cetera. So this house that my mother and her siblings grew up going to for the summer, that me and my brother and my cousins grew up going to, that was a critical emotional part. Like it wasn't, the money wasn't really that important,
Right.
But we ended up having to sell it
Right.
because what I say is the tax tail wagged the dog. This wasn't an individual, working against a lawyer's advice. This was actually a lawyer being kind of blind and narrow-minded. They were worried about these tax implications, and they were ignoring all these things that can happen in the real world,
Right.
taxes aside, that create a worse result. And when people come and say, well, yeah, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that, what you're saying is you don't want to take the time or the focus or make the investment to put together a holistic plan to make sure that all the goals you bring me, like it's not our job to say the goals,
Right.
Like we learn more about our clients than we're teaching them about the law. It's our fiduciary responsibility, like you're talking about, to make sure whatever they want, we're setting up a plan that makes that happen in the best possible way.
Right.
So when someone says, yeah, I want to get it out of my taxable estate, I'm putting it in my kid's name, I say, great. I agree we got to get it out of your taxable estate. I also don't want you to spend a lot of money in taxes. But let's do it in a way where your kid's not going to screw it up. Even if you trust your kid, something happens to them from the outside looking in, which screws it up. We can do it in a much more tailored, sensible way.
So, with that concept in mind, what should a beneficiary expect when inheriting a home or even a stock portfolio? Like, and in my world, in taxation, what people kind of tend to forget is that I look at them the same. In
Right.
taxation, the stock portfolio and the real estate is property.
Yeah.
It's just regular property.
Yeah.
It's just in different forms. You know, one's tangible and one's not tangible.
Right.
But it's property nonetheless.
Yeah, it's valid.
So
Right.
what would they expect in from the inherited side versus from just deeding it out?
Oh, well, one of the big ones is that there's going to be a capital gains step up, they call it.
The step up in
So,
basis, yeah.
capital gains, I know you know this, but for the benefit of the listeners, let's say you buy stock at $5 a share, and then you turn around and sell it a few years later for $10 a share. That's $5 of capital gains income that then, I guess now I address the audience, I got to tell you this. That's $5 of income. So then you pay 20 something, maybe 30% of tax on that $5 increase. So that's if you just do it in your lifetime. Now, separately, if I were to buy stock at $5 a share and then it increases to $10 a share, but then I give it to Joey, he sells it, who's paying the taxes? You are, right?
I am.
Yeah. He's paying taxes on it. Now, third
And
scenario.
if you
okay.
gave it to me though,
Yeah, if I gave it during lifetime.
if it was gifted to me,
Mm-hmm.
what do I do? Do I have cost basis or I don't?
Well, you have my cost basis. Yeah.
I take over the giftee's basis.
Right. Basically meaning you have to pay the tax.
Right.
But if I buy stock at $5 a share and then upon my death, it's worth $10 a share and Joey inherits it from me, he turns around and sells it, zero tax. Is what they call the step up in basis. Instead of taking my $5 basis, the basis steps up to the $10 it was worth upon death. Now, I know this is a lot of tax jargon and whatever, but the bottom line is maintaining ownership or maintaining control over assets until your death isn't just about maintaining control because you need to have control. It's about a better tax result for your family,
Right.
and probably some asset protection on top of that during your lifetime. So you get to have your cake and eat it too.
The numbers are always going to talk for itself. In my opinion, there's been many cases where I've noticed that it's better off for the beneficiary to inherit something
Right.
versus them getting it deeded out because of capital gains. And I see it constantly. I see it constantly in my practice. You know, dad has a multifamily property, the kids don't want to be landlords, so they say, no, dad, just sell it. Now, again, dad's not living in the property.
Right.
Because it was a multifamily, and he once upon a time when he first bought it in 1999, he lived in it. But now they have a single family home, and it's just a rental income business producing property. It's an investment. So what happens? Dad now his basis, and this happened a lot during COVID. His basis was whatever he bought for it. So
Right.
if he sold it before he passed away because the kids didn't want to inherit it,
Right.
now this is the consequence, because I've had cases like this where once upon a time it was a $40,000 three-family house, and then during COVID everybody wanted to get out of the lower Westchester area, and
Yep.
they started moving up the Hudson Valley and even further, or moving into Pennsylvania or moving into New Jersey, but getting out of the tri-state. They didn't want to be part of the hotspot. So what? This once upon a time three-family in the Bronx that dad picked up for $40,000, he ended up selling it for $800,000.
100%. I've seen that all the time.
And then
Yep.
you have recapture on the depreciation because it's a business use property. It's not his first or resident. There is no Section 121 exclusion.
Right.
I had a kid one time tell me he came with the grandfather to do the tax return. And he's like, but why aren't you including the $500,000 exclusion that my grandfather can get? And he's showing me a section of the Internal Revenue Code. See,
Yeah.
first of all, I was happy to not have him show me a TikTok video, because I think that's where I probably would have kicked him out of my office.
Yeah,
But
that's
he
tough.
showed me
Yeah.
he showed me a screenshot from the IRS website, and I had to explain to him, well, Section 121 would have applied if Grandpa would have had that as his primary residence for the last 5 years. He hasn't lived in that house for over 20 years.
Right.
But he sold it.
Yeah.
And he sold it because plain and simple, you didn't want to take it over as a landlord. You wanted the cash.
Right.
Capital gains were at $100,000 in
100%.
taxes to the IRS and to New York State. And goodbye,
Right.
Charlie. And you know what the sad part of this whole situation was? That the following year, the old man dies. So had
I
he
believe it.
waited, if had he waited 18 months and just inherited the house and
Right.
then sold it, he would have sold it at, well, what was the value of the house at Grandpa's date of death? 800,000. He sells it for 800,000, zero taxable.
Yeah, so it's New York City, so it's
Serious.
about 30,000 or 30% in capital gains.
Yeah.
So whatever that math is,
And what people
750
always
grand,
forget,
30% of 750 grand, that is
and what
250
people
grand. That's 250
always,
grand of tax that could have been avoided by talking to somebody that knows just a
exactly.
little bit better way to do it. You know what I mean? Like, one of my biggest gripes is that, like, we're here to let you live your life exactly the way you want to live it
Correct.
without going broke on it or without paying extra tax or without, you know what I mean? Like, it's just living your life the way you want, but doing things in a little more of a asset protection, tax efficient way.
And I have had clients that are in retirement that unload these type of properties all the time. Oh, it's a 6-family house. We're both retired. We just don't want the headache anymore, and none of the kids want it. I'm just gonna sell it and get the cash.
Yeah.
And
As long as they know what they're doing.
And I've
and,
seen
you know,
them. And again, if they, and that's the key. As
Right.
long as they know what they're doing.
Right.
A lot of the time, these people are in their 60s, 70s. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the tax law that they understood when they were in their 40s is not the same tax law we're living in today.
Right.
So sometimes I'll take these meetings and literally be a retired couple, and it's like, can you review this 22 return? I sold a rental property. I paid a whole lot of money in capital gain taxes, and I start looking it over, and if this is all I do, right? I'm in my lane. I'm picking up like mistake after mistake, and I'm like, well, none of the capital improvements are in this calculation. I'm looking at the worksheets.
Yeah,
And in New York State, you have to give your client every single worksheet. So even if I wrote a scrap paper while preparing the return, New York State says I have to give you a copy of that scrap paper.
Yeah.
So I'm reviewing all the worksheets, right? And I'm like, I don't see no. You're gonna tell me in the years you hold, you never put a new boiler in, you never put in a new roof,
Right.
and then I've been able to successfully recover tax dollars of overpayment that my clients have because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the what I had this conversation with a group of financial planners last week, where I said it all comes down to doing what you know how to do.
Right.
You stay in your lane, I stay in my lane. We work together. But the idea here is to educate the client, educate them in a way that they understand what it is that they're going through. Because again, you start talking the word basis to someone that doesn't have a master's in taxation,
Or whatever.
they're
Yeah.
not going to listen. It took me I don't have a master's in taxation, and it took me a long time to understand the concept of basis.
Sure.
And now that's all I think about.
I know.
And every day of
Yeah.
my life, I go buy a cup of coffee in Starbucks and I think about my basis in that moment.
It sounds like hell. But
But it's true. It's true.
I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
you
true
know.
because at the end of the day, this is the truth of where we live. And again,
Yeah, it's how we're programmed to think now. I mean, you and I.
right,
Like,
100%. We're two nerds. We have nothing better to do. We have no life. That's why.
Hey, man. It's I'm very happy with this. It's
Before
we help people keep their stuff. What's better than that?
no, and
know?
you know what, and to keep as much of it that they can.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Not let it bleed out into taxes or other
Right.
other ways that it could bleed out into. With that being said, the last thing I wanted to bring up to you, since we were talking about houses and everything like that, is that the biggest thing that I hear from the clients that do find the importance in tax planning, just like estate planning, right? Sure. Tax planning, it's like before I make this decision, what's going to be the consequence? Before I convert this Roth IRA over, this traditional IRA into a Roth,
Oh yeah.
what's the consequence? What's the tax plan, right? So in tax planning, it's I must take at least one meeting a month on the notorious question or the comment, or it starts with, Joe, I want to put my house in a trust.
Yeah. Okay.
And the first
They're on the right track.
and the first thing I say is why.
Right.
So why would I put my house in a trust?
So and it is good to ask why, because some people do. They hear about it on TikTok and they're like, I'm going to do a trust. I'm like, well, let's slow down a minute, because I find that trust planning 9 times out of 10 and there's the one time out of 10, but 9 times out of 10 doesn't really make a ton of sense until you're in your maybe 50s, certainly 60s, 70s. You can do it earlier. I have a trust, but trusts are going to, if they're done properly and they're funded properly, not just the house, but other assets. And then even if you don't put other assets in it, you make sure there's beneficiaries and things. Um, Number one, they're going to help you avoid probate, which is the court process that can be a big dog and pony show that nobody wants to be a part of.
and and
That's one.
and it's a popular one because
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with taxes.
Right, exactly. It's just ease for the
This
family, which is
yeah,
very important.
this past tax season,
Right.
I had a client that I was like, well, why do you want? I always ask, well, why?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, this house I bought with my second wife. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Okay, right.
Now we start now, but I'm like, but again,
But that's not-
with
yeah,
my experience, again, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but with my experience, there are types of trusts like the A and B trust that
Yeah, yeah.
are out there to make sure that we structure things so that way when we're gone, the kids from the first marriage are taken care of, the kids of the second marriage are taken care of, and whatnot,
To be
and what
fair,
have
that can
you.
be done with even that can be done with wills as well. The blended family planning. Now trusts are better planning tools. Just full stop. You know, the more
Because of
complications
there's no
or the different
probate.
the different reasons you have, just layer on whether or not a trust makes sense. Now, I would say for any person that's roughly retirement age that has a paid off or close to paid off house, a trust is going to make sense because that's something they're going to want to protect against long-term care costs, at least the house, if not more savings and investments, depending on longer conversations. Before that, when you're 30s and your 40s, even 50s to some extent, a trust is to make things easier upon death and to potentially protect against long-term care costs. And once you're in the taxable realms, the over 8, over 15 million, you can use fancy trusts for fancy tax planning. Unless you are in those realms financially, are at a point where you want to start planning for long-term care, or at a point where, if I'm being a little bit blunt about it, death is more likely statistically, which is not going to be in your, non-retirement years, let's call them, then the need to do a trust just isn't as high. You don't really need to worry about it. You need a good will plan to make sure that if God forbid something happens, your family knows what's going on. Whoever you want to get stuff, get stuff. Solid wills. But once you get into that essentially retirement age, that's when people are on the right track when they say, I want to put my quote unquote, I want to put my house in trust. What that should be translated as, or what I hope they mean is, I want to make sure that my house goes to my family in whatever way that means. My wife, my kids, half my wife, half my kids, whatever their personal preference is. Because typically I think people are kind of learning that trusts are the way to make things more customized, easier for the family, more protected against the various things that are out there. Again, long-term care, I'm going to keep saying, is one of them. So when someone wants to do a trust for those reasons, that's when we say, all right, let's go,
And the thing is that my interpretation,
Mhm.
and again, my first rodeo with a trust tax return wasn't at the tax professional table.
Okay.
It was actually, I was doing a teaching engagement with the association that I belong with, and the board decides, the education committee decides what topics are going out in the summer. And that year, it was I think it was like the nuts and bolts of trust.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I get handed a textbook and said, learn everything about trust, and I told myself I'd never done a trust tax return. What the hell am I doing standing in a podium with 50 of my peers, and
Yeah.
I'm the one that's going to be the subject matter expert?
Right.
But challenge accepted. I took an Adderall and spent 2 nights studying,
Yeah.
and again, the good thing about the pony show is that the association does the show over and over in different cities. So by the time I was done with my run, I was literally an expert in my hand.
Yeah.
And I always started off with someone in the break came up to me and told me, my attorney used to have this good saying, you form a trust when you trust no one. And
I wouldn't say
my biggest thing is where my rebuttal was, I look at it as control from the grave.
Doesn't even have to be that. I don't look at
And
a trust
again,
like that at all, to be honest. I mean,
that's just my my
you can
opinion.
do that.
It's like if I want to make sure that the family home, the generational family home, stays within the family,
Hmm.
the only way to do that is a trust.
So that's true. Look, if you want to keep the vacation home in the family,
Right.
if you've got, a kid that just has 3 bankruptcies and 2 divorces and whatever, or whatever the case may be, you want to be sure that they don't squander it. You can do that with a trust, but technically you can also do that with the trusts that are built within a will plan as well. Doing a trust during your lifetime is more about protecting assets during your lifetime, whether or not there's any family drama or need to control from the grave. The majority of the trusts I do, it pays out to the children. Now, technically, they pay out in their own separate trusts, but they're ones that the children each child is in control of their own trust, so they do whatever they want with it.
Got it.
So it's actually giving them all the control, but also giving them protection for their lifetime. It is rarer that I do trusts where we have to exercise a lot of control from the grave. Really, the trust is about, for the middle class, it's just long-term care protection against that cost. And for anybody, it's going to be just to make it easier on the family when the time comes. And yeah, we can build in controlling language if we need to do that after death. But to me, the primary trust benefits happen during lifetime and essentially upon death.
Right.
And then after that, we get protection in different forms. But that's the third question rather than the first.
Right. The two main things that always come to me when we talk trust is if the asset is income producing, we're looking at the highest tax rate after $13,000-$14,000 a year.
Not with the ones I do. Not with a grantor trust.
Not with a grantor trust.
Right.
But in a non-grantor
right.
So again, it all depends, and again, we definitely lead into this the next time we sit down, because
the trust tax picture,
it's so complex.
I had lunch with a financial advisor last week, and he goes, well, if you put your assets in an irrevocable trust, you don't get the step up upon death. And I said, that's just not true.
No.
Because it's not whether it's revocable or irrevocable, it's whether it's includable in your estate or not.
Right.
So
it leaves your
the
estate,
bread and butter
the asset
trust
no longer belongs to you.
The bread and butter trust that I'm doing for people all day, every day, it's their 1040, it's reported on, it's a grantor trust, and it's includable in their taxable estate, so they get the step up. They get their property tax exemptions. The tax picture stays exactly the same as you want it, and they stay in control of it.
Right.
But it's off the table for long-term care.
Right.
If we're talking about people that are a little more wealthy in the multi-millions, then we're just doing regular revocable trusts for them because they don't need the long-term care protection.
And the asset might not be necessarily like income producing too.
But even if it's income producing, it's a grantor trust. So it's all income to them. Yeah. It's not paid at the trust tax rates.
Correct.
So there's almost never a tax reason to not do a trust.
Okay.
And I'm doing the lawyer thing or the human computer thing where I'm trying to think of like a likely scenario where that wouldn't be true. But, like I said, I'm doing this a long time, and the tax aspects of the types of trusts that anybody would need to do, let me put it this way. The only time those tax aspects come into play is if you're doing a trust that's going to be excluded from someone's taxable estate. The only time you're going to do a trust like that is if they're over $8 million as an individual person or over $15 million as an individual person.
Right.
Because remember, married, you double up.
Correct.
So if you're a married couple in New York State, you have to have about $16 million to have a taxable estate. And if you're married for federal purposes, you have to have about $30 million to have a taxable estate.
Correct.
Then that's where you're doing the fancy gifting trusts where, you get worse income tax treatment or something, or no step up, but you're avoiding tons of estate tax.
Correct.
So it always makes sense.
Yeah.
No, the bread and butter trusts that pretty much everybody else does, all the same tax stuff.
All the same tax. Yeah.
No tax.
Keeping it grantor is always going to be the best way for not to blend those lines.
Yeah.
This has opened the door for like literally the next time we sit down.
Yeah, sorry. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about.
I love.
Of course, we're getting into it in the last.
Yeah, I love to dabble in the in trust world because it's very interesting. It's a very interesting vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But Austin, I want to thank you for
Thank you,
this
Joe. I appreciate it, man.
today and for your hospitality here at the law firm. And just want to let everybody know that they have to just keep watching because this is not the end of Death and Taxes.
Never is.
It's never going to
The
end.
two
The two
most certain things you
certain
can
things in
know.
life. Thank you, Austin.